Welcome to the No Show. My name is Andrea Edwards.
My name is Joe Augustin, and joining us in place of Tim this week is Avni Martin. Hi.
Hi, Andrea. Hi, Joe. Thanks for having me here.
And what a perfect addition for the topic that we're going to dig into later on. So, Avni, thank you so much. You did us a huge favor by joining us as well. Appreciate it.
My pleasure, and thanks for having me here. Thank you.
On the No Show today, you're going to get a whole lot of updates about what's been happening in the world, and of course, get to the main theme of the show, which is about, well, something that doesn't happen in Singapore, apparently, addictions. We've got lots of them, and we're going to get through a lot of it, and we're going to talk about how the world really is facing some of its biggest challenges because of addictions.
Yeah. But Avni, do you want to give us a bit of a background? I know you've been on the show before, but do you want to give us a quick sort of overview of what you do and what you care about?
Sure, yes. So as you know, I'm a coach and a coach trainer. So I work with leaders, organizations, and teams to support them in changing cultures, and I develop coaches. And also, I have recently just completed my training program for being an inner child integration therapist. As I'm really interested to look at, what really happens beyond coaching. So when we need to go into our past and what really drives us deep inside, what really results in our behavior, ultimately in our decision making. So I'm really excited to be here to discuss all of these things with you and bringing in that angle from, inner child perspective into many of the stories that we have on our table today.
Nice.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So shall we get down to it, the updates about what's been happening in the world?
Yeah, look, going through just this week's news versus even 2 weeks' news, there is so much that we could have shared. So I've got a couple of really quick ones to keep an eye out for, and then obviously the bigger stories that we're going to talk about. So just kicking off in Sydney, if you haven't noticed in the last couple of weeks, it's been Mardi Gras season, and it's one of the largest pride marches in the world. And for the very first time, the Prime Minister of Australia, Anthony Albanese, actually marched at the front of the parade. So that's a big thing. I thought it was important to call out, because if we had more leaders doing things like that, around the world, we could really see some change. Another devastating thing that we saw this week was off the coast of Calabria in Italy. Nearly 60 people, migrants, were killed in a boat wreckage when it crashed into the rocks. And last No Show, we were talking about bird flu, and I know, Joe, you said the scientists aren't expressing too much fear around bird flu. I'm reading some different perspectives on that, but in Cambodia, in the last week, a young girl died of bird flu. So they're obviously looking into, how did that infection happen? Because once it becomes human to human, then we've got a problem. But one of the biggest stories that broke this week was obviously the train crash in Greece. So a freight train and a passenger train collided. It's horrific. It was packed full of young people on board, 350 passengers. And for the first time in 3 years, because of COVID, they were out really celebrating this festival. It's a pre-Lent festival. So the details came through very quickly, and the devastation became quite obvious. At least 57 young people have been killed so far, and the first 2 carriages instantly broke into fire. If you look at the temperatures, there was no chance. So it's very grim. And of course, the relatives have to donate their DNA so that they can identify body parts to the victims. But the news is much bigger than this, because we've heard that a station master was arrested and charged with manslaughter, and he accepts his role in what happened. But it's part of a much bigger systemic problem. And more reports are starting to come out that the employees working for the train system in Greece have been complaining for decades about system failures, and that this is basically an accident waiting to happen, and here we are. So by blaming the station master and human behaviour for this, that's really starting to see some huge angry protests. There's a train strike. The Minister of Transport has resigned. But to me, this actually feels like one of those sparks that sets off a big fire. And the protests are going to get bigger, and they're going to be about more of the bigger issues that Greece is and has been facing for a very, very long time. It feels like people have had enough, so I'd keep an eye on that story. But very, very sad story because so many young lives were lost. On the environment front, there's multiple stories that are getting media attention, and I hope everyone's paying attention. The first one in The Guardian: Australia faces unprecedented grass fires next summer, which have been supercharged by global heating. So basically the message is Australia should prepare for grass fires on a scale not experienced before. And basically the summer of 23-24, there's a widespread fire risk. And of course, this is moving from La Nina into El Nino. So because of the La Nina, there's been a lot of water. And typically the vegetation growth in Australia is between 0.5 and 1.5 tonnes. And now it's at 4.5 to 6 tonnes per hectare. So, it's all turning brown and it's getting ready to spark. On the other side, in the UK, they have experienced the driest February in England since 1993. And they're saying that the signals are there's drought ahead, which of course impacts farming, access to drinking water, being able to even water your gardens. So when we talked about this last sort of summer, England's water is completely privatised. I'm going to get somebody needs to mute. So there's clicking and clacking in the background. There we go. So basically, it's privatised and it hasn't been upgraded for 30 years and nothing has changed since. And of course, the people who are getting the shares in these water companies are getting their dividends, but they're looking at another widespread drought this year, which of course will further exacerbate global famine. And we're already seeing the food shortages in the UK. But over in India, they're actually preparing for a heat wave over the coming months. Channel News Asia said India warns of heat waves, expects surge in heat-related illnesses. They're definitely going to see surges in illnesses, but of course, it could be much worse than that. Because basically, India is one of the first countries in the world that's moving into too hot to live territory when the wet bulb temperatures start to come in, and that's when you basically no longer sweat and you start to basically die from the inside out, right? And that's coming up. The majority of people in India do not live in conditions which are suitable for that sort of heat, and with the electricity shortages which happen when that sort of heat hits, it's going to impact a huge proportion of the population, and people are at risk of cooking alive inside their homes. And this is something that we're going to see more and more of. And then another quick one, spring has sprung in the US, and it's the earliest spring on record. Now, this is actually a bad thing, even though people are going, oh, wow, it's so beautiful and warm. I love being outside. The birds, bees, bugs, and all of the other animals survive because of the certainty of food available at different times of the year based on, when things are born or when they come out of hibernation. So, yeah, all very bad signs from a climate perspective. Joe?
Well, over to the economy, where we don't bring you as much of a news story as much as a mystery. People are wondering, where is that recession that was supposed to have gone? Well, here's what's happened. We've always been on the verge of it for the past few months. Almost every time we've done this show in the past few months, it's been like, oh, it's around the corner. All the indications are there. And to be honest, the fundamentals are still in place for a recession. But there's something about what's happening in the economy, in the sense that I think decisions have been made somewhat early by companies. And what's happened is, in the expectation that they're going to lose money and not do as well, companies have actually unexpectedly made money. And they're as far as the economy is concerned, a recession is supposed to be two quarters, I think, in a row where there's a loss in GDP or a shrinking in GDP. But because of those better numbers, it doesn't come out in the same way. So what we've actually got is a situation where everybody is expecting the recession. Everyone's thinking about the recession. And when anyone talks about performance issues or challenges and all that, everyone says the same thing: recession. Now, of course, it doesn't mean that there isn't there still isn't the risk of the recession, because what's happened is we are currently in a place where there should have been something really bad that happened in the economy, but we had a lot of buffers that came in. So there was the huge spending that they came in from not just the American government, but governments all around the world in response to COVID. If there wasn't any of that, we would be in not just a recession, we would be in a depression at this point. So the kind of echoes of all those actions still reverberating through our global economy. And then, of course, there's the whole thing of everyone wanting to do something about it, right? I mean, it's challenging situations. I think inflation has come back a little bit, which is a bit of relief in terms of usually inflation is what stuff or stifles the economies trying to come out, and it makes it really slow down. But because inflation has backed off a little bit, there's a bit of pressure coming off that way as well. So we still don't have a recession. I'm not about to wave the flag and say everything is completely fine. I think we're still on the verge of things, but there's a kind of quiet optimism. And it's the kind of thing where everybody's sitting at all the executives of the world. I think what they're doing right now is they're kind of like standing at the edge of the pool and sort of looking to the left and looking to the right. And it's like, you go first. It's that feeling right now. They could be this huge growth in terms of the economy, in terms of stock markets. But if you look at, I watch the charts and I see what's happening is we are at a place where the market wants to break out. But it's not been decisive. It hasn't gone out and said, "Oh yes, we're now striking out," because the conditions are not really optimum. So what's happened is everyone's come to this gate, and it's just like opening time at Disneyland. People waiting for the gates to open, and then there'll be a rush. But no one wants to go ahead of anybody else. So we'll see. We're still in a pensive state. Could it go the other way? Absolutely. I mean, it's about people try to look after their capital. So if there is a shift in the negative direction, what happens is that there's kind of a scurrying that happens, and everyone tries to go back to defensive situations, and they will try and protect their money. So no recession yet, but I wouldn't fill the seat yet. I think he might still arrive at the dinner a bit late.
Yeah.
Yeah. Waiting to see what happens on that one.
Yeah. You know what I think? We're going to welcome Mital, who's come and joined us. Thank you, darling.
Hello, Mital.
All right. Avni.
Yes, I'd like to talk about the poisoning of the Iranian schoolgirls. As you may have read, around 1,000 children in schools got poisoned. And it's considered to be allegedly revenge poisoning by a group of people who are there to essentially shut down the voice of these girls. And what voice do they want to shut down? It's apparently related to when the girls actually stood up in protest for another girl who did not wear her scarf properly. So a girl who did not wear her scarf properly apparently was then detained, and then she died when she was in custody. So a lot of school girls have stood up against it. And as a retaliation, a group of people have poisoned these girls. Now, whilst it's, absolutely devastating and disgusting human behavior to do this, my thoughts as I read this is to go beyond it, because this kind of stuff keeps happening all the time. We keep seeing oppression of women, and above and beyond oppression of women, we keep seeing people in power misusing their power. Ultimately, that's what this is a situation of. And I feel like it's like a pandemic that goes unaddressed. I think like it's a global phenomenon that goes unaddressed. And it makes me think and wonder, what is really that global phenomenon, and how can we actually stop people abusing their power? And how can we stop people using all the means that they have in an unwholesome way to hurt another person just to get what they want?
So I just like this whole story breaking out is it's devastating, right? So one of the ideas that they're not sure who's doing it. One of the ideas is they're trying to shut down girls being able to be educated. And to me, it just feels pathetic, right? You're so scared.
It is.
You're scared of little girls. But any country that holds women back, and there is a war on women. We don't seem to want to acknowledge it. In America, in many countries around the world, there's a war on women. If you take away women's rights, especially the right to an education, you take you reduce the possibility for everyone, not just for girls. So, it's clear, it's been proven, if you support girls, that your society flourishes. And if you don't, everyone suffers, and it's just so clear to me.
Yeah. And Andrea, whilst we completely agree to this, there are so many people who don't agree to it. And that is the problem. So it makes me think about how do we really address those people who do not agree to it? Because they are also the people who are holding the power, and they have the ability to go around poisoning young children, right? So I think one of if there is any way, and it really makes me feel really passionate about doing something about it in reference to, if we can help people reflect on what is it that we really want and why do we do these things. So if they want to oppress girls, they have to really think about, why do we want women to be oppressed? What are we so fearful of? Right? Somebody has to look at themselves in the mirror and look at that as to what is really our true fear. If women were successful, equals, and had equal power, what can possibly go so wrong in their lives? And can they handle it or not? And will they benefit from it or not? And, will their children and the entire society become more successful? So I feel like if there is a way that people can really look at what's really underneath it and what really drives our human behavior, like what is it, who are we really, and what is it that we really want, and how can we truly get what we want ultimately? Then I think that would be brilliant, and that would be great.
Yeah, I agree. Apparently, there's also an onion shortage we need to be addressing. We need to be thinking about.
Yes, that's right. So, coming from India and with an Indian background, if there is a shortage of onions in India, that is like catastrophic, right? It's as bad as people. It's not as bad as people cooking up in their own houses, but it's really bad to have onion shortage because all of our food has onion in it. So, not good at all. Yes. So over to you, Joe.
But they also think it could be part of a global food crisis. And that's something that we've watched brewing for a number of years now. So global famine, global food shortages, it's happening. Anyway, Times of India reported that one. Yeah, Joe? Oh, no, it's me, isn't it? Yeah.
Sharks.
So, sharks in the Bangkok Post. The title is Falling Shark Numbers Worrying. So basically, 75 of the 87 species of sharks in the waters around Thailand are endangered, and this includes whale sharks, leopard sharks, hammerheads, and bull sharks. So, and in the last decade, it's been alarming. So, in 2003, they were the sharks that were being caught, and obviously the best thing we can do is stop catching them, right? But in 2003, the sharks weighed 14,409 tons. By 2011, it was 1,424 tons, which is a 90% drop. And then in 2018, which was the last time they did it, they only managed to catch 419 tons. And that was in 2018. So we're 5 years since then. So please don't eat shark. In fact, if anything, I think we all should. We've got to be protesting the overfishing in our oceans, and the best way we can protest is to not eat seafood until it gets sorted out. We need to kill the market because it's a dead ocean. It's an ecosystem. It's a top predator. Dead oceans, dead humans, right? And the other big story, of course, in the UK was Rishi Sunak has hailed a new Northern Ireland Brexit deal. And if you're paying attention to that, because to me, it's like incredibly simple and incredibly complex. The DUP needs to confirm it. I don't know if you got any thoughts on it, but maybe there's some progress there. I don't know. What do you think, Joe?
It's one of those things, like you said, it's really simple and it's really hard, right? The problem with big economic deals, or not just economic deals, any kind of government thing is, if only there's a way for you to get everyone to agree and be on board, then everyone's fine, but because of all the nuances and because we are in a world increasingly where I don't agree with you, and here's why, and I'm not going to move, and I'm not going to compromise, and what is politics anyway, right? I think that there's a real need for more. People always talk about less politics. We need more politics, and we need politics to be what it really should be, which is people who don't agree coming together to find a way to live together.
Yeah, nice.
Well, speaking of people trying to live together, you may have heard about the news about Adam Scott, the creator of Dilbert. Well, he's kind of been cancelled enough. Some would argue that he cancelled himself. He's on a podcast, which is the other thing about this particular story is that there was probably a chance to get in front of it and not have to say what you said in the public space. But essentially, he was talking about how he made some comments about living with the Black community and saying things like, well, that's why he's decided not to live with them. He made some uncomfortable comments, and basically the backlash has been universal. Around 0 is the estimate right now about the number of newspapers who will continue to run Dilbert, and I think largely there's a bunch of people who say, well, yes, and you deserve it. I feel a little bit torn about this. I mean, I understand that as far as the view is concerned, I completely understand the view that it's not on, right? But we are in a world where there's not even an opportunity for someone to try and back away from something and sort of explain themselves. The people kind of like process it very quickly. It comes in, they've got to label it immediately and go like, that's what they meant, and therefore we kind of feed them to the sharks. I think there was a bit more nuance to what he was saying as I heard it. I'm not suggesting that he was on the right side of history here, but I think there's a little bit more to it sometimes.
Yeah, there was some commentary that he'd been a bit unhinged for a while, so it wasn't just a one-off and then he went too far. But I think we do live in a world where there's certain things that are just unacceptable, and saying things like, white and black people shouldn't live together, that's just not acceptable.
Yeah, I think his comments were a little bit about the propensity of a certain racial group to do certain things, and that he was trying, therefore, to avoid them, and therefore he had chosen the way he had chosen. But I think that's the thing about that, right? It's the thing that I think happens, but you just are not supposed to talk about it. And yet at the same time they should be, and again, this is, like I said, it's one of those difficult things. There's no easy to this at all. There should be a way to approach it somehow and go like, what do we think about this? Can we talk about it? Because I think it's more of a powder keg over there, and I think it blew up a lot bigger simply because of everything else that was happening at the same time. I mean, I think there's always what you do and what you say and what you're allowed to say, and I think that's not always in alignment.
Yeah, I'd like to add to that because I think Dilbert's story aside per se, I did not hear him say exactly what he said, so I haven't heard the exact context, but it makes me think about people say what they say. They don't always words come out, and I think there has to be some grace in our society to really ask a person, if something was offensive, for example, that was offensive. What exactly did you mean by that? Why did you say that? Right? So to give people a chance to explain, because nowadays we are, as a society, just so quick to react to anything that we see. It's like we have to have an opinion about absolutely everything. And I really do not subscribe to that. I mean, I would subscribe to an idea that people can say what they say, do what they do, but it is really important to check in, to understand, why did you say that? Why did you do that? What's really behind it? What's the motivation? And understand the true heart's motivation rather than what we want to make it mean, right?
Well, there's also this thing that we have as a society, really, to shout down the wealthy and powerful if they have an opinion about something. If someone without wealth and without power says something like that, it's like, oh, okay, I just met this weird guy on the train. You know, I mean,
Yeah.
that's the big difference.
Yeah.
Uh,
And I was just going to say something similar happened to Rishi Sunak when he first became the prime minister. They showed a clip of less than 3.5 seconds or 4 seconds of him taking a moment to pause and think, and then he answered the question that was asked of him. But they basically replayed those 3.5 to 4 seconds over and over again on media to say
Yeah.
that he basically was lost for words and he doesn't know what he's doing, and
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. But actually, he was just taking a pause and he was thinking about something, and then he responded really well. But
Yeah.
it's just again that, right? People want to make something out of something. But yeah, that
I mean,
comment is not directly for Dilbert because I haven't heard him say what he said.
yeah, I mean, we need to be encouraging people to take a pause before they open their mouths, right? But
Yeah.
for Dilbert, there's a responsibility here. He's a person of influence. What the words he uses matters. He's got a global audience, and he's lost his work, and it's been doing it for decades, right? So there's a consequence to opening your mouth, especially if you're a person of influence, and I think that's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So people have been talking about this next thing for quite a while now, about who do you hold responsible for fossil fuel? Because, I mean, over the years, the scientists within the companies have known the damage that it's been doing to the environment. So who do you hold responsible? You can hold the companies who actually engage in that business. You can also hold some of the companies perhaps who are engaged in the financing of those businesses. And this is where the news of BNP Paribas being the first bank now to be sued for fossil fuel financing comes in. It's going to be very interesting how it all comes together, because it's one of those things where, as far as the legal framework is concerned, it becomes a precedent for everything else, and so the pressure is really on. And here's where a little bit of, I think, nuance needs to come in as well. If what is being sought is seen as too much of a sweeping kind of reparation, or some other legal solution is sought after, sometimes what happens is, if the demand is too great, the judges can't actually accede to those things, because it opens too big a can of worms. So we've got to see how the lawyers will approach this. There's always the law is always about small wins in the right direction, rather than the one large home run. And that doesn't just, I mean, the expectations of the audience will be that way, but usually what will happen is there'll be small steps towards the right direction.
Yeah, you're so right. The climate crisis is a fight in the courts as much as anything else, not just on the streets. All right, Avni, we've got some sports washing.
Yeah, we can talk about sports washing. We can also talk about, I think, what Joe talked about last show about ChatGPT. So sports washing is definitely a thing. We are seeing green fields instead of snow fields where people are skiing. So global warming is, unfortunately, we're seeing so much evidence of it left, right, and center. But if we have a couple of minutes, then I'd really love to touch base on Joe's story that he shared last week. Joe, what do you think about this ChatGPT, essentially, in terms of how we can actually embrace it? I know we've talked about it offline a little bit. So, what do you think about schools, colleges, universities actually embracing it as a tool? Because it's an unstoppable force, whether we like it or not. And I personally absolutely love it. And so I think it'll be great for schools, universities, and colleges to actually use it and change the curriculum to reflect what it is to be human and what it is to be creative, and how do we really, what then are we going to test humans on if it's not their writing skills, right?
Well, I think what would be good about ChatGPT, if you make it a subject in school, is that it calls into question the need to have other subjects to be taught along with that, and that includes ethics. And I think what we do need is that package of stuff that goes along with that, right? So the ethics of using ChatGPT, the people whose work is derived from, whether you can whether you can submit this as your work, who does the work belong to? It'd be really good for I think kids to start thinking about those things as well. And in fact, I think educators themselves, they don't really think about those questions too, because what they've got is they have their metric, they have their way of marking stuff. And I was saying, I think on the last show as well, I said that the reason why there's so much pushback usually is because there's so much change for the educators to deal with, and so they would rather say, no, let's not do any of this because there's change. I have my curriculum all set up, or I have this method already of checking whether or not this is an original article. And so they're the ones who've had their feathers ruffled. And actually, they're the ones who have to come to terms with it. They have to work out, the world is what it is, right? I mean, you could have said back in the 90s, we don't want the internet. It's going to happen.
Yeah, no, you're right. And last time, Avni, when we spoke about it, we were looking at some of the potential negatives, because we embrace new technology with glee, but we as a species, we're not very good at looking at the negatives, which we, forewarned is forearmed, right? But there was one piece in the New York Times, and the title is "Don't Ban ChatGPT in Schools, Teach with It." Now, on one side, the teachers are exhausted; they've gone through COVID, especially in the public system or the government system. They're short, they're overwhelmed. And this is a great article in the New York Times. I'll put it in my weekend reads, where it really sort of talks to the teachers how they can work with it. So it's not a burden. It's a good thing, but also it's about helping the children, like a child that's trained in artificial intelligence. And you know what? Reading this, I really want to encourage my boys to embrace it more. Whereas before I read this, I was probably a little less sort of interested, but I think it's a really important. We've got to look at it all, but we've got to have our eyes open, when it comes to artificial intelligence. That's kind of my view.
I'll tell you what, ChatGPT has made me, and I'm the worst person in this field, on the screen, and definitely in many rooms. When it comes to admin, I'm terrible, right? And ChatGPT has made me a better executive, because what I've learned to do now is to think, okay, now I want to get this result from this software. What do I have to do to get this result? And it's actually made me a better executive.
Okay, that's good. That's good to know.
Yeah, and I think just like the internet is an unstoppable force, and basically ChatGPT is also the next level up now from there. And I think schools will have to reflect on their curriculum, because I don't think that there is anything we can do to stop it. It's just going to be more and more integrated, more and more used by kids moving forward. So they just need to look at how do we change the curriculum so that we can embrace it rather than ban it.
Yeah. And parents, don't be scared of it, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
and like I used to say that about social media, all the parents were scared of it. And I'm like, well, the first thing about social media is you've got to be on it and understand it so you can understand it for your kids. Because a lot of the parents that were freaking out, especially in the early days, they weren't actively present on social media. So you can't understand the technology if you don't use it yourself. So that's one. But keep your eyes open for all of the different sides. And then look at the innovation that's going to happen. Study the innovation that's coming. And it's coming fast. It's coming faster than anything. This is the greatest technology revolution in the last 50 years. And we've been through so many technology revolutions in the last 50 years. And this is way up there. Adoption rates, like off the charts. We've never seen anything like it. So, but.
Yeah. And speaking of technology, it brings its own issues, of course. And we're about to go into that.
So I'm really happy to have Avni here because of her area of expertise. But there's a YouTube channel called Then and Now, and it's a great channel worth subscribing to. You can support him on Patreon as well. Anyway, basically, this week he released one called How New Addictions Are Destroying Us. And of course, when I shared this with Joe, we had a bit of a joke about addictions, right? But it's a look beyond the normal addictions that we think about, which are alcohol, cigarettes, drugs, sex, gambling, prostitution, whatever, pornography. And it's more about digging into the behavioral addictions, which can be work, social media, our phones, gaming, YouTube, even our health goals. People are addicted to that and beyond, right? And basically, when you watch this video, the only conclusion you can come to is that pretty much every single one of us has an addiction, at least one, right? But when I watched it, and, you know, it's very rare for me to watch a video that sort of blows my hair back. And this was definitely a blow my hair back kind of moment. It felt like he really captured a big picture view, and that's I always appreciate it, of one of the massive societal challenges that we face, which goes back to what Avni was saying earlier about going underneath and understanding the issues, right? And I think that if we can be really honest about it and the problem that it is creating for society collectively, we might actually be able to look at solving it. You know, but his biggest point, his biggest argument is that you and we can't solve it. That we need the businesses who are creating the social media and the technology companies, so more ethical companies, business for good. You know, there's a whole message around algorithms can be algorithms for good or algorithms for destruction, and the algorithms that we're seeing at the moment are for destruction. So there's a big sort of conversation going on about this, but we can solve it. The first part of solving it is for all of us to accept it, to see our own behavior. But Avni, do you want to kick us off? I came up with a whole bunch of what can we do, but
sure. Yeah, sure. I mean, so I'd like to really reflect on the whole fact that we are all addicted. Absolutely, right? And I, as an inner child therapist and as a coach, I often look at what is really the heart of addictions, because I work with people on it. I reflect on it for myself, my family. And ultimately, there are two main reasons for addictions. So yes, technology and algorithms are governed in a way, or they're organized in a way to really grab our attention and really make us addicted. Advertising is doing the same thing. However, ultimately, we are the people who are addicted, right? And if they don't do what they are supposed to do from an ethical perspective, we still do have the control to look at how are these affecting us. And if we choose that, okay, I have this addiction, I don't want it in my life, we then can look at why do I have it? And there are two main reasons why we do have addictions. One is that we're running away from pain. So as a being, every alive thing wants to run away from pain. We basically want to avoid pain, right? It goes to the Buddhist principle that we have an aversion to what we don't want, right? So we run away from the pain. And how do we run away from the pain? By creating an escapism. So we basically escape into something. So when we have a cigarette, when we have alcohol, it makes us feel like, right? I took a moment to breathe, or the alcohol took me away from my thoughts or my anxiety or my worry, right? Or when we're into the gaming, right? It takes us away into another alternate world where our problems don't exist for that moment whilst we're immersed in that. And of course, each one of these addictions will give us that dopamine that is shared in the YouTube video. It gives us a dopamine. So in that little momentary moment, it takes us away from our pain. So we feel good. And so then we are hooked because of that feel good and that dopamine. So the first one is running away from pain. And the second one is which is still running away from pain. So ultimately, it's all about running away from pain. But the second one is that essentially, as a society, we have become more fragmented. We're not living with our loved ones. Our families are far away. The world has become much more international. Like I'm, for example, living in Singapore. I don't have any family here whatsoever, right? So we are that much more removed from our communities, and people are moving away from their villages or wherever their parents were. And Joe, I don't know if you might be lucky, you might be living in Singapore and your family might still be here, but I know Andrea's family are all over the world, right? Mine are certainly. So I think that creates a sense of loneliness and a void. And I think social media is unfortunately, I say absolutely perfect for filling that void of loneliness. I think there is a pandemic within us, which is that we are all lonely people. We are more lonely, even though we are more connected. So I think that is something that we're running away from, which is essentially running away from pain, a kind of pain.
Yeah, I found that whole perspective on seeking pain versus pleasure as a sort of what's it called? You know, that's how
A
we're wired.
motivator. Yeah.
It's how we're wired, right? So
Yeah.
you know, I mean, we
very
you know,
primal.
in the last sort of 100 years, and probably even the last 50 years, right? We went from scarcity, not to a huge percentage of the population of the world, but not obviously everybody in the world, to abundance and excess, right? So he really talks about that. And so when you're talking about social media, it to me, it wasn't even just about social media. It's about, like, he visualized the noise of the world so beautifully. I thought, you know, showing, you know, probably Tokyo or New York, just signs everywhere. I've been in rooms with people designing technology. So you walk past a Coke machine and it sends a signal to your phone, and an ad pops up going, "Hey, do you want a Coke, Andrea?" You know, and you're just right there. So you go and get one, right? That sort of, and I'm like, "Whoa, that's not a good development of technology." This constant 24/7 noise coming at us, and we're all actively and willingly participating in it until we decide to check out, you know. And then you've got people living up in the woods because they just can't stand it anymore, and we can't understand them because we're part of this sort of really complex, noisy society. But how much joy is there in our society? You know, are people happy? You know, like in the last couple of years, it's just like, spend time thinking about what makes you happy. Do you like this? Do you want this back? Do you want to go back to what we left behind? And we've gone back into the old world in full throttle with all of this climate emergency on the doorstep. You know, and you're kind of looking at it and you're like, oh my God, we're really not getting this lesson, are we? You know, but are we even happy? That's, to me.
Yeah. I mean, the heart and soul, they've done some, sorry, Joe, please continue.
No, I was just going to say that okay, my slightly contrarian view is we've got to watch ourselves for these nostalgia glasses we always put on, because, you know, we talk about, you know, back in the old days, and I can vividly remember being unhappy when I was young, in simpler times. I can vividly remember, you know, there were times when people were very, very, very unhappy, and it's partly, I mean, I like to simplify it to this, right? We're comparative beings. We're very much we're designed to see the difference between this and that. That's how we're made. And what we are now in is a world where we are being thrown into the fire, where we are shown, if we participate in social media, or if we have email, or whatever, or we have someone sending us messages, whatever it is, as long as we're part of the world right now, we're being shown at a much faster pace how the world might be better somewhere else, or someone's life is a bit better than ours. And what we do is we see the gap. So there is the chasm between what we have and what we want to have, and that is actually the source of most unhappiness, right? So the burden of knowing in this case is, if you know there's something better, then you're going to be upset. Like, you know, the I can't remember the full story, but there's a story about how the devil is trying to tempt, or someone's trying to tempt you know, a cardinal, and he's beyond temptation, right? And then someone comes along and says, I'll tell you what I'll do. And then he just goes up to the cardinal. And then the next thing is the cardinal is breaking out in violence, and he's cursing and everything. And the question is asked, what did you tell him? He said, well, I just told him that his brother just became Pope. You know,
your point about nostalgia is a really interesting one, because I totally 100% agree with it. But at the same time, I think that we also don't allow ourselves to do that. Like, if you actually look at a lot of commentary around nostalgia and pushing back on it like you just did, I also think that we are not allowing ourselves to look back to the best. But I think what we've got to look forward to is a combination of different sort of things, which isn't about the past, and it's about creating a new future, right? Do we want to live in a world, you know, and the biggest point that he's making in that is generational destruction, you know, was one of the terms he used around the impact of technology on our children. So people who've suffered from deep trauma, and our kids, are up for, like, we don't even know what's going to happen to them, or what, you know. We know that female suicide rates are up because girls feel bad about themselves because they're on Instagram. We know that youth suicide rates are up. We know that mental health all around the world is a massive issue. So we know all of this stuff, right?
Yeah.
And at the core of all of this stuff is the world that we've built from it's not just social media, it's advertising, it's technology companies selling products, it's getting those hooks into us, to buy into something. And, the natural sort of inclinations of human beings, the psychology behind it all. It's like they've mastered the psychology of how to control us. And we've stepped into it with open arms, going, control me, because this is joyful and I'm getting constant pleasure. But now that I'm getting pleasure from this, I need more pleasure, because any addiction requires more and more and more and more. And then we're all out of control, and we're in this world where everyone's just like running around. People haven't got time to spend with each other. Families don't spend with each other. Don't even have meals together. We're broken. We've actually broken our own contract with ourselves as a society, and we've allowed this to happen, and it's out of control. And now AI has been put into the middle of it, and we're like, oh, come in, AI, that's brilliant. Let's just embrace you. But how much further until we've seen that we can see the societal destruction around us.
Yeah.
Social media, we can see what it's done to democracies around the world. So, at what point? What point does it all blow? Yeah, or has it already?
Well, I want to rejoin that, but I'm going to get to Avni. You were about to say something just now.
Well, I think there is actually no stopping it, right? Just a bit like ChatGPT conversation. Technology is upon us, and people are making billions out of us being addicted to social media and advertising and all of these kind of things. So I think there is no stopping it. It is a matter of embracing it and looking at what does that really mean. And I go back to, Joe's point. I thought that was really interesting, the whole burden of knowing. Because in between the lines, it knocks on something which I visualize almost as a door. It's like a door to wisdom, right? Right now, everyone knows what everyone's up to. And most people are very, very happy and very, very keen and very quick to shout about every little thing that happens to them that's wonderful, right? And so everyone knows about everyone's successes and, all the fantastic pictures and whatever they're up to. And so just like you said about that Pope story, the other guy was upset because his brother became a Pope, and that makes him upset. Whereas actually he's got nothing to be upset about, nothing at all. So I feel like our lives could be incredibly happy if we can gracefully carry this burden of knowing. And if we can find the wisdom within us to gracefully carry this burden of knowing. And I try my best to blow it out and live and breathe through. And literally I have to blow myself, I have to literally blow, breathe out every time I feel overwhelmed by all the things I keep seeing on social media. And, naturally sometimes, and I try my best not to, every now and then this little thing comes in. Hey, why don't you shout about this? Or why don't you do this? And, for whatever reason, that's another deep story altogether. I am not motivated anymore. I'm really demotivated, in fact, to shout about all the achievements, because I feel like, so what? So there is a different part of me that's now here because of my inner child work. I was driven by, acknowledgements and all of these things, recognition and whatever. But those things drove me to get to where I am. But now I'm not motivated by those things. And I see the fallacy in that, right? I see the fallacy in showing off or putting it all out there. I don't find it motivating. But still, in saying that, I still feel, a part of me still feels, and I look at everything on social media and I think, oh, that person's doing all of these things and they're talking about it. I'm not. What does that say if I don't talk about all the things that I've just done in the last, 6 months? I've not shouted about it. Does that mean something? Or does it not? Should I not? Do I have the energy to shout about it? Not. And if I shout, what's the point anyway? What does it even do to anyone? So all of these things come through in my mind, and I just go, just breathe it out. It doesn't matter. That burden of knowing, right? Bring on the wisdom.
I always try and participate in alignment with my personal integrity, right? So that's always sort of what anchors me on social media. And I just don't want to do any of the other stuff, and I don't mind that people do it. But I think if we want to change it, one of the things that we can do is participate in a way that we'd like to see the world participating. But I think we need more people doing that
Yeah.
versus, because, we are a minority still. And I've been doing this for a really long time, and it feels like I'm never going to be able to break through with that message, even by showing, leading by example, right? And that's been a bit of a frustration, but I'm not there for ego. I'm not there for likes. I'm not there for any of that stuff. It just does not interest me. It never has, it never will. But that ego-centric, like, life's great. I'm happy to show you when my life's shit, and I do it on a regular basis. My husband went through a major operation, and I had to think I needed to share it because he's got friends and family and people who love him around the world. But I was very conscious, how do I share it? How do I respect his privacy and dignity? I asked his permission about what I could share. Some people just share everything, everything when it comes to medical. And I'm not comfortable knowing about everybody's medical situation. I don't really want to know your personal, what's going on. But some people are really comfortable with that, and that's okay. They're not doing any harm. But I want to just quickly go through. Joe, were you going to jump in and say something? I just want to go through some of the conclusions that I picked up when I was watching it.
Well, okay, so very, very quickly, the problem we have is not the technology. The problem we have is the lack of technology that we have. Like in terms of like the world around us is changing. Technology is building up. But the technology, and I don't mean in terms of electronics or whatever, is human skills to deal with these things, right? Because at the core of it, if we are just who we are and we want the world to work the way we are, that means there's no room for development. The world can't change. The problem now is the rate of change is so fast. We're surrounded by these circumstances, which, by the way, I mean, look, even in a group of 100 people, the real obligation was to be good at what you did, and so people would know it. But because you were only competing with 100 people, it was easier to be the best barber. Right now is that you can be really good as a barber, and you can put on TikTok and you instantly know that you're nowhere close to being the best, right? And in fact, you don't even feel, like if you talk about the imposter syndrome that we always feel, right? I mean, now how much worse is that? Because I'm kind of good at what I do, but really when I look to the left and right of me, or when I think about what other people can see when they look to the left and right of themselves, is the fact that I am not as good as this. So what was a fallacy of the imposter syndrome is actually now becoming more real. We can actually prove that you're not the best at what you do, and we can actually prove you're not the best top 10 in the world, and we can actually kind of prove that you're not the top 100 in the world. So it's a technology issue. We need to add more technology to ourselves, I think. And that's maybe where AI is going to come in, because I think AI can be programmed in such a way to be your outer self. Because I picture a world in the future where, and this will be where there's going to be a digital gap, there's going to be an economic gap as well. But it'd be very interesting if I could protect myself with AI so that then I can deal with the world in a way that's not going to trigger me as much.
That's one way of thinking about things.
But we have an opportunity to work on ourselves where we don't get triggered anyway. We don't need AI to trigger us.
Yeah, but that's the question that always fundamentally was for me, is like we work so hard to deny who we are. And that seems to be the ultimate solution, because we react to things, we get angry with things, and that's actually who we are. But we have to deny ourselves of that for the world to happen. Is there a way where we can reframe it so that instead of this being the stressful, bungee jump, it's the exciting thing that happens? I mean, so that's the conundrum I find. There's because we're human beings, we interpret things as we do, and we give power to so many things because we tell the story to ourselves about what this is about. And sometimes, like you mentioned before, it's like it really doesn't matter in the end. No one will remember me in 100 years, hardly any one of us. Anything I say right now, my opinion, it's not going to make a difference really, but we feel as though that this is such an important thing that everyone's listening to us.
That comment, denying who you are, I thought was a really interesting one, Joe, because I don't think I spend any time denying who I am. So yeah, that was. I have never felt that from you either, but I think it's quite a complex thing that you just said. So one of the things, sorry, Avni, did you want to jump in on that point?
I did actually, if that's okay.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
because
okay.
because we have to control and deny who we are if who we are isn't really ultimately aligned to who we like to be somehow. But if we, and there is a way, and this is why I went into this whole inner child work, because there really is a way for us to work on things within us in such a way that we don't have these reactions of anger. We don't have these drivers that we're not proud of, meaning that we then start to get new drivers. So I've gotten rid of so many drivers and I'm feeling a void, I must say. And to be quite honest, what Andrea said earlier really inspired me and in between the lines, like a mentor, to understand how can I then fill this void. So if I've gotten rid of some parts of my ego and all those internal drivers of recognition and whatever, then what makes me want to be on social media and share anything? But I think I really heard what you said there, is that it's all about, then what do you stand for? And you talk about that. And that inspires me. When I start talking about that, I will not stop and you'll see me everywhere. But I haven't really, to be quite honest, I haven't really begun fully expressing or sharing publicly what I really feel inside. But yeah, that day will come one day. Andrea, thank you for that inspiration there.
Yeah.
But yeah, Joe, I just wanted to add to that basically I think it's not about, we must not deny ourselves. We can never control what's within. It's just never going to happen. So we want to be within who we want to be outside. And that is actually possible.
I've got a book for you, Joe, that might help. That's what Uncommon Courage is all about, the journey within, right? And it's sort of my journey, but it's also the wider journey of walking around the world. But one of the things that I found really, really effective about the way this video was filmed was the majority of time you saw him, he was in nature. And if you didn't notice it, he was talking about what is the landscape that you want to live in. And he was talking about digital landscape, where, he's in these busy cities and it's like beep, 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 beep. And then the other time he was in nature. And I think that's, I thought that was a very subtle and beautiful part of the video. It's like, I do think we need to start asking ourselves that question: how much do we want to be in a digital landscape? My boys have got virtual reality headsets. They love it. Like, I don't even want to put one on. I've got no interest in it. But we've got to start to ask ourselves the questions. As parents, we've got to ask ourselves the questions. We can't keep the kids away from it. It's healthy for them to be able to use the technology that's coming through. But we've also got to keep nature, because if we actually close nature off to our attention, we're certainly not going to save it. There's that movie where everyone's living in these absolute dumps, but they've all got virtual reality where they're living in these beautiful worlds. I can't even remember the name of the movie. And it kind of almost feels like if we don't pay attention to the natural world, we're going to destroy it and then build a society where we're going to live in the digital world permanently, because it's more beautiful than the natural world. But it was the living in the digital world that created the natural world. Do you know what I mean? So I think it showed a real fine line there, that we're on the cusp. Did you guys pick that side up? Yeah.
Yeah, I love this video. I love the visuals. I love the visuals of how he uses the word language and about landscape, and then he's in this beautiful landscape, and then there is all this digital stuff happening.
Yeah.
I wanted to touch upon a fantastic point, a really, really important point that Joe made about the lack of technology, because I think we are this wisdom that we also need for us to, in a sense, protect ourselves from the demanding influx of the digital world. I think there is a lack of tech there, because as a mom with 2 teenage kids and a 6-year-old, my husband is a proper techie guy, and if he can work out all the firewalls that anyone can, then he should be able to, shall I say. But my 13-year-old son is totally able to hack into the system and break all the protection that he puts in, right? So I think there is actually, I think we don't have the right applications and the right systems that helps the parent protect kids if they want to be protected. And on that note, I wanted to mention that kids do want to be protected, by the way. like my 13-year-old and my 6-year-old, both of them come and tell me that, Mummy, please take away my technology. Help me take away my technology, literally. So on that day when I was walking, when you asked me to do this show, I was 9:30 in the evening. I was walking with my husband. I get a call from him saying, Mummy, you need to help me. Can you ask Daddy to ban this thing? And can you ask Daddy to ban all the applications except Duolingo on my iPad? Because I'm using it too much and I don't want to stop using it either. And I need some help, right? That's a 6-year-old telling me, right?
Wow.
So, I think there is a lack of tech.
There was a couple of weeks ago, I put a story in the Weekend Reads, and it was just talking about how if you can empower your children to make their own decisions around technology, and that's basically what I've done, right? Jax was my 14, or he's 15 now. He wasn't doing great at school for a period, so we basically took his PC away from him, right? And it was a few months, and by the time he got it back, I mean, he was so obviously excited. He's the gamer of the two. He was so excited, but before that, he said, it's been really nice having a break from the technology. And ever since he's gone back, he does have a self-regulation to technology. So I think that's what we've got to try and partner with our kids, because it's not going to go away. And I think if you create, if you give them personal responsibility, you're gonna have more success. If it's antagonistic, then you're never going to win. A couple of things that I really thought was important, and because I've been reading about this sort of stuff a lot, but I think it's really important that we start taking some responsibility for understanding how our brains work and how we're wired and why we respond to things that we do, and the role of dopamine in our lives. There's loads of information on this, like loads of information. I share lots of it. It's from how the political landscape is now being used and abused from a social media perspective, how the media use it, how advertisers use it. There's degrees you can do at universities around the world where you can learn how to manipulate people to do your bidding. And of course, there's a whole bunch of stuff around how Putin has used social media for more than a decade and has basically been waging war. And a lot of the destruction that we're seeing in democratic societies is linked back to this strategy. And that's some really interesting stuff. But it's all the way to our acceptance of it, like our acceptance without thinking. I think that's something. And if we can understand our brain, I think we can do it. We can help ourselves a lot. But the big essential message for me, and the whole sort of story and the mess that we found ourselves in, I suppose, we are out of control individually, and we are out of control collectively, and we have to take that control back. And that was one of the sort of conclusions that I really took away from it. Like, we accept all this new stuff, but even though we know that there's bad stuff, we still accept the new stuff and get excited about it. And then there's this wreckage in following us of destruction. We saw it with social media, with the elections, and the crumbling democracies around the world. And we know that it's all linked to what's going on with technology, and yet we still accept it. But the bigger message was businesses, the technology and social media companies have to change. And just this week, TikTok announced that for all users under 18, they're going to set it up so that they can only use it for an hour a day. There is a way of getting past that, but it's a start, it's a start, right? So I think, we've got to look at our responsibility too. Big takeaways?
Joe, you go first.
Well, okay. Well, for me, it's always this thing. I've always said that the end of the world's problems, well, not the end, at least the path to the world, a better world, is always going to be through benevolent dictators. I think ultimately you need to have someone come across and say, no, this is not good for you. Stop it. And that is unfortunately, that's the kind of thing that crosses the line in terms of freedom, and wave a constitution in my face because it's not ethical and what have you. I always think that if there is sometimes there's a simple way for things to happen. You go like, well, if you do this, you'll die, and you have to make the threat real, right? So most things, like if you say, people tell you, I can't do this, I can't do that. Listen, I've got a gun, and I'm gonna take you out if you don't do this. They can do it. That's usually what
Yeah.
it is. So it's about the the closeness, or the how imminent the threat really is, and how real the threat is. And we've got to figure a way. And I think that's going to be the heart, the most behavior in terms of getting us to behave better. We have to understand what is imminent, what is really, really important for ourselves, and we have to learn to help ourselves feel it. And we do a bit of like time traveling to the future. How will I feel if this isn't done in 20 days and whatever it is? And for me, I got to tell you, the problem is, if we know how to do it, it makes it very hard for us to use it. Because for myself, I know so much of this. No one can approach me without me knowing what they're going to be doing. I kind of know what the kung fu is about, right? So we need a bunch of benevolent dictators. Can anyone say LKY? Who can figure out a way to help society go in the way it needs to go. And then, of course, with an overall view that says this is good enough. I think the big problem that we face, and this bit of wisdom came from of all people, Jimmy Carr, is that we don't have enough. We never get to enough. We never feel that this is enough. And so even if we're having a discussion, I'll tell you a real life story that we had. We were talking about one particular topic, and very rare for me to agree on everything, and I agreed on every single aspect of it, the behavior, whatever was going forward. And I only said, but there's just only one thing that I don't want, and it was just about the label, how we describe this, and that wasn't enough, So we've got to come to a point. I'm learning for myself to get to the point and go like, you know what, 80%, 50%, that's actually enough.
Yeah. I think your comment about the benevolent dictators is interesting because obviously we live in a world where, from the right, it's all about less government. And actually what the world needs right now is more government. So that's a fight that's going to come, because what's happening here, and this whole point is that this is the market at play. And we've lost our cultural, political, social, we've lost our guideposts that we had traditionally, because the market has become the guidepost. And hello, this is what it looks like. Do we still want it? Are we ready? Are we ready to wake up? Or are we going to keep fighting for, sorry, Avni.
That was before.
Yeah.
No, I agree with you. Like, are we going to keep fighting for something that was before, or are we just going to accept it, right? Yeah. So I on your thoughts, I agree with both of you. And then something else on top of it is that, so Andrea, you're saying that things are changing rapidly, and things are coming to us in a way that feels like it's out of control, and that is the way it is, and that's the way it's going to be. There is simply no stopping that, right? I think technology is going to come at us at an insanely rapid speed now, especially that development will speed up. Quantum computers are coming our way. And so with the advancement of quantum computers and AI together, I mean, technology is going to come at us at even faster pace than it has so far. This is, I think, just the beginning of a wave. So we're just going to have to embrace it. And Joe's point about having benevolent leaders, or somebody who can really be, or dictator who can really come in and say, this is how it needs to be, and this is righteous. Again, I wish and I hope, but I don't really see that that's necessarily going to happen. I hope it does, but I really don't think so. Right?
I think he's got to work on his sales pitch for that one, right?
Yeah, I really wish you can. Yeah, because if we could have a dictator like that, I would wish for a dictator like that to come and stop all the wars to begin with, right? All the killing, right? First, before they control the technology. If we can have a leader like that in the world, I'd like them to do something else. But I don't think that's necessarily coming either. So I think
not benevolent anyway.
Yeah, but so I think
the dictators are coming, but not the benevolent ones.
Yeah, but so we can be our own leaders, and I guess we can be our own guiding posts, right? We can work on ourselves, and we have that control. So I guess my message really is that the lack of control is going to come our way, and no one's going to help us gain any control except ourselves. It really is me, myself, and I, who has to manage my life and all the things that are happening within. And same message goes to a 6-year-old as it goes to a 13, 30, or a whatever, 100-year-old, right? That it is up to us. Whatever we can do is what we can do. We can't necessarily rely on others to do anything for us, per se. Yeah.
But we can work towards pushing these global brands to change their business practices so that they stop destroying society. We can vote for the sort of leaders that we need in the world right now and support them to succeed. There is a lot that we can do, but of course, taking care of ourselves and our own mindsets and educating ourselves and being, more switched on to what's going on and working to solve the divisions that exist in the world. There's a lot that we can do, and a lot of people are feeling useless. And I just really want to encourage people to stop feeling useless. There's so much that we can do. Even if you're just picking up rubbish on the beach, you're saying you care and you want to be part of the solution, not the problem, right? So just get involved in any way that you can to address the big problems that are going on. I think we need a sort of a council of matriarchs and ambassadors who, the best people, the greatest people with big hearts and full of compassion and empathy who basically just they're like guides for the world. I think we need something new, something we've never seen before, because if we don't do it, self-destruction is imminent.
Yeah, but it's also an opportunity. It's an opportunity for those businessmen or those opportunistic, smart people out there who are developing the technology to hear this and hear the fact that there is a hopelessness that people feel. There is this addiction. There is these issues that people feel that they can't, control technology. So that's an opportunity for somebody out there who's listening in to develop software, develop applications that we will buy. We will buy with open arms and spend a lot of money on it to help us.
But the only way that works is if we change the whole economic system, because currently it's all about making money, right? We have to change the incentive. What does success look like? And it's about, if we want to build a better world, big part of creating a better world is completely revamping the global economy anyway, away from growth and GDP and as a measure to human well-being. So that we can flourish. So that's one of the big sort of stories in the world at the moment as well. Anyway, let's wrap up. We've gone a little bit over, which we always do, but that's okay. What's keeping you distracted at the moment?
Well, I'm not sure if I mentioned this before, but the series Poker Face with Natasha Lyonne. If you like Columbo back in the old days, speaking of nostalgia, this is a show which has a very simple premise. She's someone who can always tell if you're telling a lie, and that little piece of logic and of course her personality makes the show a very entertaining one to watch. How you find the show? Well, that's going to be your little challenge using the internet and associated technologies.
Okay. Where have you been watching it?
It's actually streaming on Peacock. So one of the surprising things, successes is that most people were just talking about all streaming companies coming up, and there's going to be another also ran. Peacock has managed to come up with a number of compelling shows, and Poker Face is one of them. The other show that I kind of recommended you is a new series from Apple TV, is Shrinking. And that one is one of those rare things where you get to see Harrison Ford in a TV series. Harrison Ford actually has decided to do 2 TV series, and it's kind of like blown the world. Shrinking is one of them. The other one, 1923, which I have not seen at all. But Shrinking is good. Shrinking is about psychiatrists and how they try to solve the problems of the world, and again restricted within what they have to combat them. So like to be a psychiatrist, you're supposed to be this, supposed to be that. How do you do that without being that?
All right, you got some people who are agreeing with you. We've got Clinton, Vicky, Cindy, and Maytal all contributing to the conversation. Thanks, guys. We appreciate you being here. Avni?
What's keeping me distracted is I'm in the process of starting to write a book for Penguin. It's about my coach training system, the happy coaching system for businesses, organizations, and teams. So that's keeping me busy. And the other thing keeping me busy is I have really refocused my attention away from some of those. I basically gave up a really senior position in an institute because I wanted to, and I really need to focus on the book and also my kids. So my kids are taking up a lot of my time in a happy way, in a good way. So which I didn't do as much of a few years ago, but now suddenly, new awakening, call it whatever, new me. But I'm just letting go of a lot of things in one place, but then putting that investment into my kids, and I'm enjoying that. So
Nice.
that's what's keeping me happily distracted.
Yeah, and it's hard doing it all. Vicky's recommending Mrs. America. That already sounds
Nice.
interesting.
I'd love to watch that.
I'm going to have a cough. I'm totally with you, Avni. Like the focus on the children. So my boys are 15 and 16 now, right? And they're starting to get towards that intense end of education. So obviously spending time with them, making sure that they're on track and just doing their best. I don't like to put too much pressure on them, but it does, and emotional support and social support, all the stuff that comes with being a kid, right? So being a present parent. But so my week of entertainment has been the latest season of Drive to Survive. Have you guys watched it?
Oh yeah, I saw it all in one night.
The whole series, like even 2022. Yeah.
Oh no, actually, I mean the whole new series, the whole new season. I caught it all in one night. I caught the whole season live last year. I mean, the whole season of racing. But I watched the show. I mean, look, that's if anything, that's an indication of what's going to happen with F1 in the US this year, because it's the big marketing. It's the show that markets the show, right? I mean, it's such a good show. Such a good show.
It's all about Formula One, and it sort of really shows all the characters of all the drivers. So Daniel Ricciardo's an Australian Formula One driver. So he was in the first season. He was obviously the first of the drivers to say, I'll be part of this Netflix thing. And it's taken off around the world, and it's a huge global success. And it's obviously generated so much more interest in Formula One. And, I love it. So, Avni, you might just watch it for understanding the mindset of a Formula One driver. So people who are driving at the highest speeds, they make decisions in sort of fractions of seconds, and you're like, and so understanding the mindset of them. And some of them are goofy or a bit crazy, and some of them are so like hard, and they're not warm and they're not friendly, right? But it's a really interesting mindset, as well as the teams. You meet all the different teams, the managers, the principals, all that sort of stuff. So it's a really fascinating program, and I recommend it. They've launched one now, the same team on professional golf. I'm not as interested in watching that, but I've enjoyed the Formula One.
There's one with golf. There's one also, I think, same producers who are also doing tennis. They all get into that. Actually, I want to save you 100 hours this year. Okay, wait for next year's Drive to Survive. And you'll save yourself 100 hours, because you don't need to watch the actual races because they're boring.
Yeah. But it's also it's an interesting sort of angle, like of storytelling. Like the only consistent thing in every Drive to Survive is the red lights going before a race starts, and everything else is how do they tell this story over? It's like 4 seasons now. They're telling the same story in different ways and from different angles, and I find it from a storytelling perspective. I found it the people behind it are doing an excellent job.
It's a great for anybody who's a speaker, it's a great source for leadership stories, because you hear so much, you see so much in terms of management style, because if you think it's hard to manage the office that you've got, try and have a room where everyone is a multi-millionaire, and you have to kind of get them to do what you want them to do.
Yeah. And teamwork as well. Sorry, Avni.
Yeah, no, sounds like fun. But speaking of Netflix, Travelers and Manifest are my 2 favorite TV programs. I'm into my sci-fi with my hubby, and so we watch them. I don't know if you've heard of them. Yeah, they're just
Two
sci-fi.
two different
really
shows.
fun.
One is Travelers and one is
Yeah,
Manifest.
Okay.
2 different shows. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks everyone for tuning in and having a listen. We really appreciate it. Oh, wait a minute. Picard, Clinton's adding Picard for Star Trek nerds like me out there. I am not a Star Trek nerd, so yeah, I won't be watching it.
Yeah.
Thanks, Dulce. All right, Avni, thanks for joining us. It was you jumped in at the last minute and you really helped me out because I'm still floating a little bit in my life trying to just manage everything that's been going on. So I really appreciate you jumping in and supporting us. And the perfect person for the topic. You know, I'd already chosen it before I even reached out to you. So, and Joe, good to see you again, Dulce. So we'll see you all in a couple of weeks, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Take care, everyone.
Thank you very much. Anything for you, Andrea and Joe, and thank you very much for having me here. It's been fun. Thank you.
Cool.